welcome everyone to the Business Swansea Power Hour. So if you're happy then, Julia, I'll hand over to you. We'll run through the presentation then, so we can come back at the end for sort of an informal discussion based upon what you've covered.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Thanks, Matt. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So as Matt said, I'm Julia. My business is Daisy Chain Consulting, and I live and work from Buryport. As you can probably hear from my accent, not from here originally, chose to move here about 3 years ago, and I'm just loving living here. And I work as a business coach, a coaching supervisor, and a leadership and soft skills development trainer. So all things to develop people, really, to make organisations more effective. And this is a topic that is so close to my heart because having moved here, I set up my business originally 14 years ago in the Midlands, and did some of this promotion work for myself then. And then having moved down here about a year ago, decided to look at kind of promoting myself and starting networking and building my business more almost from scratch, really, locally. I've been working to promote myself and my organisation using a lot of the things that kind of practicing what I preach, I suppose, using a lot of the things that I'm going to talk you through today. So I have real empathy for some of the challenges that this can bring us. And I suppose the most important thing I want to say to anybody that's listening and to those of you that are here is that I have never met in all the years, and it's been a fair few now that I've been coaching and working with people in organisations, I've never met anyone who finds this easy. And everybody tends to find different bits of this more challenging than others. So I would anticipate, as I take you through the slides today, there'll be bits of this that you'll be like, I do that really well. And that's brilliant, because you're going to be successful at some of this, or you wouldn't be where you are now. And hopefully there'll be things that I talk about that maybe you'll recognise for yourself and be thinking, do you know what, that's me, that's what I find a little challenging. And then I'm hoping there'll be what I go through with you will help give you some ideas of things you could focus on. I can't give you all the answers, it's very personal. And it may mean that afterwards you want to do a little more work on this yourselves. And I'm going to give you a few little questions at the end just to start you thinking about it from your point of view. But I suppose what I'd love you to bring into this is just be curious and interested. And as I say, I'm sure some of this you do really well already, and they will hopefully be some things that will be helpful for you to focus on too. So unlike me, I'm normally really interactive, but I'm going to talk to you for probably about half an hour, depending how long I waffle for with my slides. And then, as Matt said earlier, hopefully we'll get a chance to ask some questions and have a bit of a discussion afterwards. So let's make sure this tech is going to work. I'm just going to share my slides with you. If you're not clear about anything that I talk about, please just stop and ask me. I won't be intending to confuse you. So this is what we're going to be focusing on today. So how to promote yourself and your organisation. So the things I'm going to cover over the next half hour, I'm going to look at the core components of effective spoken communication. Obviously, some of our communication is done in a written format. Some of this may well be helpful for you thinking about how you might write something if you're posting, etc. And a lot of our really useful communication when we're promoting ourselves might be through videos, it might be through face-to-face interactions, networking, pitching for clients, or maybe presenting to large audiences, etc. So a lot of what we're looking at around promotion of ourselves and our organisations is really thinking about how we can speak as effectively as possible. Going to look at some of the common challenges that impact our ability to promote ourselves effectively. I may not cover absolutely everything, but I'm going to try and cover a wide variety of different things that I've come across, and I may well share some of the things that I've found challenging myself as I've gone through this journey. Going to look at something called mindset. Growth and fixed mindset in particular, and how that can impact our confidence when we're promoting ourselves. And then we're going to spend a bit of time thinking about your organisation, what makes that unique, what you can offer, and how you might communicate that as part of the message that you're putting across too. And I've called it an action plan, but it's more what you're going to take away really to help you focus on. So this time that you spent either watching or being here today isn't wasted, and you've got something useful and practical you can take away and focus on. So first thing we're going to look at is that first outcome at the top, and be thinking about what we need to focus on when we're thinking about our spoken communication. So there are three core components of spoken communication, and what often happens for a lot of people, you may be different to this, but what often happens is if we do any planning or preparing of what we're going to say and for promoting ourselves when we're speaking, we often focus more on the words we're going to say, what we're going to say. We don't often plan or think about how we're going to put that across. And as you'll see when I talk through this, the how is often even more important than what you say. So, of course, the words are important. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about values a little later, but it is important to choose positive words, things that are compelling for people to hear, that are based on your values, and that are unique and relevant to your business. And we're going to spend time during this presentation today focusing on some of that to help you work out, the words you might use for you, because they need to be unique to you, because you need to believe what you say. And then you'll have your way, your unique way of putting your passion and your energy across about what you do. So I'm not in any way saying the words aren't important. What I am saying is sometimes we will spend 100% focusing on that bit of it and not really thinking about these other two elements I'm going to talk you through too, which are just as, if not more, important. The first of those is voice. So how those words are communicated is often much more important than the words themselves. So really thinking about the attributes you've got naturally that help your voice to be interesting, that help someone to want to listen to what you're going to say, and the things you might need to work on. So for me, my God, do I talk too quickly a lot of the time. My speed is something I have to work to control and to make sure I'm not with all my energy going blah, 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 at someone and they can't take it in. So I've worked hard over the years to slow myself down, to make sure that I can properly be heard and people can keep up with what I'm saying. Now, you will be different. And what's really useful is for us to know what works and what doesn't. So tone, thinking about the tone of voice that we're using. How positive is our voice sounding? How much warmth or energy are we putting through into what we're talking about? The volume. So are you naturally a soft, quieter speaker? Do you need to focus on raising the volume a little bit of what you're saying so people can hear you? Our pitch, the energy and the enthusiasm that we might try and put through in how we're speaking. So I think the most important thing is you're wanting to be you and be that best version, if you like. So everyone else is taken. You can't be someone else. So this isn't about trying to emulate other people. It's about working out how you can sound the best that you can. And we're going to be talking through some of the things that can impact our belief, our confidence, etc. today, that may well then impact how your voice sounds when you're putting your message across. So that's your voice. And then, of course, if you're on screen like this, if people can see you, or if you're in a room with someone, all of your non-verbals are really important too. So everything else that puts that message together, as you may be able to see on my camera, I'm a real hands gestury person. So when I'm in person with people, I try to manage my hands. I also make sure my camera is relatively high. So if my hands are doing lots of things down here, it might not distract you too much. but we focus on things like our body language, our facial expressions. So having eye contact with people, making sure that we are putting across appropriate facial expressions to what we're actually speaking about. So if you're wanting to pull people on board and talk to them like I am today about something you have passion around, it's how you can make sure that your face matches what you're actually talking to the person about. So breathing, yes, we need to breathe to survive, of course we do, but breathing really can impact on how our voice sounds. So I know it's often seen as an old wives' tale, taking a few deep breaths, but my goodness, it's useful for us before we go into talking or communicating about ourselves. Because what, of course, it does is it brings oxygen into our system and into our blood, which slows our breathing down. So if we can do like almost like yoga breathing, where you kind of breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose, counting 4 or 5 each time, 4 or 5 of those kind of breaths before you go into talk to somebody, or before you stand up, I don't know, at a networking meeting, whatever it happens to be, is so very useful, because then our breathing gets reflected through our voice. Same with heart rate, very similar. So an eye contact I mentioned earlier. Tip for you if you're ever looking at communicating online, as I'm trying to do at the moment, is to look into the camera as much as possible when you're communicating, because that allows you to almost look into the eyes and have eye contact with everybody that's on screen or watching a video that you might be taking. It's really easy online to look down at notes, or just to look down at your screen and perhaps not be connecting as much as you can through the camera itself. So there's lots of different ways that we can enable ourselves through thinking about our non-verbals as well. Another thing is fidgeting. So if you're someone that you know can fidget, try and placing your feet, if you're sitting, directly to the floor and grounding yourself through your feet, I've just done that, can help us to keep ourselves stiller if that's something that you want to work on. So what you work on around this, of course, depends on who you are and what are the challenges that you have around these particular elements around spoken communication. You will do some of this well. So it's about focusing on the bits that are really going to help you. So the first thing we're going to focus on now is how we put stuff across. We're going to look at what later, so the words later. So some of the common challenges that people tend to face around this topic, I'm in no way saying this is an exclusive list, there may well be other things too, but some of the things that we tend to face are perhaps having an unhelpful mindset. And I'm going to talk more about that later. I've got a few slides to go through, because shifting and reframing our mindset is incredibly useful to us if it's getting in the way and stopping us being as effective as we can be. Our internal chat. So this is kind of the negative things that you might say to yourself. So we might say to ourselves, I can't do this. I'll never be able to stand up and be confident around this. You know, this always will happen for me. And the one thing that's true is if we say it's going to happen, it tends to. And if our head is giving us unhelpful messages going, oh, you don't want to do this, this isn't going to work for you, then it's going to be a bit self-fulfilling. So we're going to have I'm going to go through a little bit around some of the things we can do to help with that. We may have limiting beliefs about ourselves, about other people, about the world that impact us around this. So we might, I don't know, we might be telling ourselves, oh, that person, they're so much better at this than I am. You know, that lovely comparison thing. I'm not very good at this. I won't be able to do it. And of course, that tends to be what happens if we tell ourselves that. And the good news is we can change these things. Focusing on what you say, not how you say it. So that thing I was talking about just now. Lack of preparation. Now, some people are so good at this, but often we're not. So if we just say I'll just wing it, if that helps and enables you to be the best you can be, fair play, go with it. For lots of people, doing a little bit of prep is really helpful. You know, saying out loud, I did before this. sat down for 10 minutes, went through my slides and said out loud some of the things that I'm saying to you now, because it helps to hear ourselves and to think through how we want to say something and what we're going to say. And another thing, there's thinking and feeling that we have to do something rather than shifting it into, I want to do this. Because if we tell ourselves that we want to go and promote ourselves, we want to go into this meeting, then we're much more likely to help ourselves with our mindset around it. And focusing on things that we're concerned about rather than things that we can influence. And more about that in a little while on another slide. So these are some of the things that we're going to be thinking about. And first of all, we're going to focus on those kind of internal chat things and what you can do about those. So internal discussions, they often call it, I don't know, the devil inside you, or it might be a voice that you hear. It might have you, often does with me, my dad's voice, if there's telling me off about something, you know, it might be people from the past. But we often can tell ourselves unhelpful and often things that really aren't true or are vastly exaggerated. You know, e.g., we can't speak clearly. Others are far better. No one will want to listen. All totally untrue, and you don't even know. But it kind of leads us into limiting and unhelpful thoughts and feelings, and then gives us behaviour that isn't helpful. You know, we might stammer or stutter or go red or be uncomfortable, or one of those behaviours that can come through which aren't helpful, that we would like to be different. The really good news is you do have direct control over what goes on in here. Lots of things influence it, but you can control it. So what do we need to do? This little model I'm going to share with you now, I think is one of the most useful things I have ever learnt, and is incredibly useful that you can do for yourself. You can work it through with other people too, but you can hopefully do this for yourself too. So, and I'll try and use an example as we go through it just to help you. So this is called stimulus gap response, all right? And all it really means is there's a stimulus, so something is happening or about to happen. So this might be that you're about to go into a network meeting, or it's coming around the table and you're about to stand up and speak. Yeah? And what happens is our beliefs and our assumptions and our habits are all part of who we are. And unless we make different choices, they kick in automatically without us even thinking about it. So those voices, those beliefs that will go, oh, I can't do this, I'm going to make a fool of myself, or I'm going to mumble, no one's going to hear me, or, you know, all of those downers that we could do that stop us being the best we can be, they all kick in like that immediately. Your brain is really good at going back to old stuff and going, this is what's going to happen, this is what I think, these are the assumptions I am making about what's going to happen. Happens is we have a response immediately. So this is happening, this goes on, and off we go. And we do what we have always done. So this is ever so useful for us when it's tackling things that we've always done that aren't helpful to us. So some of our stimulus responses can be great. You know, if you go into a network meeting and think, oh, great, I can't wait for the opportunity to stand up and say what I'm going to be saying, and your beliefs and your assumptions are all positive and enabling for you, your response is going to be exactly what you want it to be. You don't need to change it. So what we're talking about here is when the things that you do, the things you say, how you behave, is something you would rather not do and you'd like to change. So you don't want it. Then what we want to do is the stimulus will still be the same, the thing that can kick it off. And what we're wanting to do is create a gap. It doesn't have to be that long, but something that allows us to think and shift. So what we're wanting to do is to reframe this and be going, I am looking forward to doing this. I want to do this. This is a real opportunity for me. You know, having a chance to do this means that I'm going to start to promote myself. Other people here are probably feeling exactly the same thing as me. You know, not everyone's going to be perfect at this. Whatever it is you need to do, it depends what the messages are that you're giving yourself to shift it and reframe it. And they often call it flipping it. let's flip this around. Yeah. So how do I want to feel at the end of this? What's this going to be like? And then what we do, we give ourselves different choices of how to respond in a different way to how we've done it before. Yeah. So you might be in a networking meeting, about to come around and be thinking, this is my opportunity to put my reframe in that I've thought about before. So I know I might do this to myself. I might feel uncomfortable. So let me just, my gap thing is often just to look down, breathe, and then look up again, forward, and go, off I go. Yeah, with what I've prepared that I'm going to say. Does that make sense? So this is all about giving yourself different choices. And it's often useful to think it through beforehand. Think, what would I like to be doing or saying differently to what I do normally? And then, like, when that stimulus comes along, you're like, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this differently because I've worked it through. Does that make, I hope that makes sense. So if anybody's got any burning questions, but I hope that makes sense to you. So this is all about building your self-awareness. So much of this is about being aware of what you do to get in the way for yourself, what it is that you're thinking that isn't helpful, and shifting it so that you can give yourself choice to do something in a different way. And this fits really well with the concept of mindset. So mindset, I've just got a few quotes here for you, which I think are useful just to introduce the topic. So as Carol Dweck is one of the foremost writers around growth and fixed mindset. So if this is something that you like the sound of and you want to do any more research into it, there's so much online available, and she's a real guru around this topic. And she says, mindsets are just beliefs. They're powerful beliefs, but they are just something in your mind, and you can change your mind. And I think that's quite significant, is to know that what goes on in here is yours. There'll be so much that impacts it, but you can shift it. Buddha said, we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think, which is so true. And I love this Henry Ford one. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Because if we can think ourselves out of something, and we can also think ourselves into things. And that's what I'm wanting to try and help you to focus on now, is to be thinking about how we can help our mindset be as useful as it can be to enable ourselves to do the best job possible, really, of promoting yourself and your organisation. So first thing I'm going to do is look at a little bit of theory that can help you understand it. And this is, I don't know whether any of you have heard of Stephen Covey, but he's a total guru around leadership. And I love this model. I do a lot of one-to-one coaching with people, and I nearly always end up sharing this and using this with people because it's so helpful. So he talks about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. And by the circle of concern, he means things that worry, bother, and frustrate us that we can do absolutely nothing about. So it might be just generally in the world, it might be governments, it might be legal things, it might be the state of the world, it might be things that are happening in the world of business that get in the way for us. But equally, when we're looking at this kind of area, so when we're thinking about self-awareness, what we can get caught up in is all the things we can't do anything about. We can't do anything about whether we get the work or not. That's down to somebody else. We can't do anything about how other people see us. That's their stuff. We can't do anything about other people's attitudes towards things, what's going on outside of us. What we can do something about is the stuff that sits in our circle of influence. And this is, or what we're looking at, and I'll show you on the next slide, is making that as big as possible. So focusing ourselves on the things that we can do something about. So we can influence how other people see us. We can influence what other people, how they receive our messages. We can influence by the way that we are. We can think about where we channel our energy and focus things to make this circle as big as possible. So what you'll see on here is with mindset, what we're looking to do is to positively, proactively focus ourselves to be as far as possible that left-hand part, which is the positive energy enlarging that circle of influence. So focusing ourselves and our mindset on things we can do something about, not things we can't. Yeah. So we might think, I don't know, if you're 5'1" and you know you need to stand up to promote yourself in a circle of people and they're all much taller than you can't do anything about how tall you are. So put it out your head, it doesn't matter. But you might get wound up by that or think, oh, everybody else is so much taller than me. So what? Does that make it a really rubbish example? But it's that kind of thing that's really useful for us to focus on, is to focus on what can I do something about? Instead of getting caught up, which so often we do, in that right-hand column, that right-hand picture, if you like, where we get reactive and we reduce our circle of influence by focusing on the stuff we can't do anything about. So much of this is putting our energy and focus on the things we can do something about, and a lot of that fits with the concept of mindset. So Carol Dweck, in a lot of the stuff she wrote about, talks about having two different mindsets, and they're called fixed and growth. All of us get fixed about some things in our lives. And I could talk to you for a long time about this around lots of different topics, but we're going to focus this as much as we can on the topic that we've got here. So about how to promote ourselves and our business. So when we've got a fixed mindset, our mindset tells us that our skills and abilities are fixed. So might tell us things like, I'll never change. I can't speak in front of other people. I'm rubbish at promoting my business. When we're looking at shifting towards a growth mindset, our mindset says that our skills and abilities are not fixed. You can influence them and you can develop them. Doesn't mean we're saying we're going to be wonderful at everything. That's not real. But what it does say is, if I practice a lot, I'll be able to be better at this. I can promote myself more effectively. If I think positively, I can change and develop myself. If I get clarity around my message, I'll be able to influence others more, for example. So that's what we're meaning by mindset. And I've got a few slides where I'm going to give you some examples of what some of this can look like, and then some ideas about how you might choose to develop your mindset. So these are generic ones, but they're also, some of these are really quite useful for us to consider around promoting ourselves. So when we're in a growth mindset place, that blue head, what we're telling ourselves is that if we don't do something well, if we see it as failure, it is an opportunity to grow, so it's useful. Yeah, I can learn to do anything I want to do. Doesn't mean I'll be brilliant. I might not be a concert pianist, but I can learn to play piano, for example. Challenges help me to grow. My effort and attitude to determine how will I, the more effort I put in, the better I will be at something. Feedback is constructive. When we're in a growth mindset, when people give us feedback, it's useful because it gives us an opportunity to think about moving forward. I'm inspired by the success of others instead of finding it threatening or worrying or comparing myself. And I like to try new things. So on the right side, you'll see some of the ways that we can get fixed around the same things. Seeing failure as the limit of my abilities. I've not done that well, so I'm not going to try again. I'm either good or I'm not. My abilities are unchanging. We may not like to be challenged. We may feel around some of this stuff, I can either do this or I can't. When I'm frustrated, I give up. Feedback's personal. I stick to what I know. So I hope you can see when we get caught in a fixed mindset, it really can get in the way of us being able to shift the things we really would like to shift around promoting ourselves. So just a few more examples about growth mindset and how we can shift things. So when we get fixed, we might say anything around this topic, I'm not good at this. Growth mindset is a way of shifting it, that circle of influence going out and saying, what am I missing with this then? We might tell ourselves we're brilliant at something already, in which case we then don't give ourselves the chance to continue to develop and learn and be on the right track. We might say, I give up. I'm not going to another networking meeting. That was awful. Well, it's always going to be awful if you don't ever go back. Whereas the growth mindset will say, I'll use some of those strategies we learned from Julia the other day and have a go at doing something differently. Fixed mindset might say, this is too hard. Growth, it might take some time and effort. It often does when it's something that's challenging for us. I can't make this any better. I can always improve. I just can't do, got maths as an example here, but it might be promotion. I'm going to train my brain in how to promote myself. I made a mistake. If you're a perfectionist, oh, that's tough. But growth mindset is mistakes help me to learn. What can I gain from this? What will help me next time? You might have, she's so good at this, I'll never be that good. I'm going to figure out how that person does it and make it work for me. It's good enough. Is it really my best work? I love this last one. Plan A didn't work. Good thing the alphabet's got 25 more letters in. You know, we can often stop after one thing and go, well, that didn't work. And it's like, well, try something new. Do something different. I'm really hoping all this is making sense. Right, how do you go about cultivating a growth mindset? So these are some of the things that can help. You may be brilliant at some of these, and there may be some that are useful. That first one is so helpful with other people, if they've got it, and also with yourself. The concept of yet. So when we say to ourselves, I'm no good at promoting myself, you put yet on the end of it. I'm not good at this yet. Because it immediately says, I can be, I will be, I'll get there. So it's ever so helpful just to recognize when you're doing that to yourself, when your mindset's closing in and going, can't do this yet, I will be able to. Embrace a beginner's mind. Wonder what could be possible. This third one's so useful. Build your self-awareness. If you don't know what's going on, you can't shift it. So becoming aware of any of these things that get in the way for you allows you to shift them. And changing from challenges to benefits, that positive self-talk's useful. Focus on the process, you know, and the value, and set goals and celebrate your wins. And make sure you're challenging your assumptions and beliefs and embracing that imperfection. So I've spent some time focusing on how we communicate. I'm just going to do a little bit now on influence, on kind of what we're saying about ourselves. So the words that you might use and where they might come from. And we're going to start off by just focusing a little bit on culture, because this is about your unique personality in your company. So this is about how you treat other people, the way people behave when you're not looking. You know, if you're on your own, how you behave. The unwritten rules and assumptions that guide how you do things, your norms, your values, we're going to come to those in a minute, beliefs and attitudes, that invisible glue that holds you together, and how you do things. So culture is outside of the remit of this, but really, really important. And the reason I've included it is it feeds so much into your values. So the stuff that sits below the line here is all the stuff that is really important to you and how you put stuff across around your business. So if you have other people working for you, it's how they come across. And if it's just you, like it is for me as a sole trader, my culture is all about how I put myself across, what my values is, what my mission is, what my purpose, being clear about those things. So it allows me to then give them the customer experience that I want and the offerings out there through my brand. So I'm going to focus just a little bit on values, because getting clear about values is hugely important for us, because it gives us some of the really important words that allow us to communicate what is unique about you and your business and what you want to put across so other people really buy into you. So it's your fundamental beliefs, your principles, how you interact with people around you, your staff, your customers, community, bit of a moral compass, what's right and wrong from your point of view, guide your behavior, your decision making, help you create your direction and purpose. And it really is the words that represent what your company is all about, what you care about, and what's important to you. So how do you work those out? So just in a nutshell, these are some of the things that are useful for you to do to define your company values. So getting your team together, if you have a team, to get everybody's perspective is vital. If you work for yourself, ask your trusted people, you know, what they think your values are, and go through that with them as well, because it's really important. Define your why. So what is your purpose, your uniqueness? Analyze your culture. You know, what works now? What is successful in your attitudes and your behaviors that are core to this? And brainstorm your values based on those things. So once you've had those conversations, some of the words start coming out. Narrow down the list. Most important and relevant. You really want your top 5 that you all completely buy into. And then it's creating a clear, simple definition for each value. So just one sentence that sums up what you mean by this. So for example, I'll just give you one of mine. One of my top values is authenticity. And for me, it's about to be myself and help other people to find their authentic self. That's so much of what I do is summed up just in that. Yeah. So it's about tying them into action so they're not just words. I've worked with lots of businesses that have pretty values on the wall, but they don't actually mean anything. It's like, what's that mean? How do you know that's there? If you go and talk to the receptionist, will they tell me what your values are and how they live them? And build these into your self-promotion, because this is the what you say about your organisation that makes it come to life. So some of those, I've just given you a few areas that you can focus on around core values. Goodness, this isn't all of them. There is so much information around this online that might help you. And equally, working with a coach, working with other people around you can really help you narrow this kind of stuff down. But it's often around teamwork, goals, innovation, trust, customers, depending on what's important in your line of business. So just want to leave you really before we move to any questions you might want to ask me with just some things that are useful to consider for yourself. So are there things to think about and take away, I suppose? What have you learned today that can or could help you to promote yourself? I'm a real believer that these things are only useful if they're practical. And if there's something that you can take away that you do something with. So if you haven't got that, that's my challenge in the questions, is to ask anything you need to help you with that. How can you challenge yourself to stretch just a little out of your comfort zone? If we want to move forward with promoting ourselves, we tend to need to stretch ourselves a little bit. And, you know, and what are the values of your business and how can you put them into words? Because it tends to be very important to start with that when you're thinking about what you're going to say. And obviously all the things that we've talked about around mindset, etc., are really useful for considering how you put that information across. So thank you for listening to me so patiently. I'm kind of trying to keep it to about half an hour, so we've got some time to talk about any questions. So I'll stop sharing now.
Thanks, Julia. There was lots to think about there, I think, in terms of self-reflection and sort of putting yourself into certain instances that you're. I just sort of a quick thought really, and I think it sort of fits into 2 or 3 of the things that you were talking about in terms of mindset, comfort zone in particular, but this thing about familiarity and sort of complacency. And the specific situation I was thinking about, sort of working in local government, the first time I presented to scrutiny committee or planning committee, when you go into this council chamber with the wooden panels, it's a really intimidating environment to go into. But I think sort of almost that fear sort of can bring the best out of you. And by the time you've gone in and done that half a dozen times, I think you sort of almost run the risk of complacency in terms of how you present yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the question is, but it's a case of sort of balancing those 2 things out and almost remembering how you felt on that first instance to make sure that pressure brings the best out of you in those in situations about and how you carry and communicate yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all depends who you are, because it sounds like you're the kind of person, Matt, that kind of pressure will be positive for, and
Yeah.
will give you an energy and give you a drive and give you a kind of focus. For others, going in and doing that the first time could be terrifying
Mm.
and could really get in the way. And it may be that over time they then become more comfortable, which allows them to settle more and be even better, if you know what I mean. So it all depends on the person. But that's why I think that self-awareness piece is so important. So you kind of check in with yourself. You know, if you're going in for the 10th time and you're thinking, "Ah, it's a breeze, I know how to do this," it's recognizing, going, "Oh, what am I thinking? And how could that get in the way of me
Yep.
being as sharp as I want to be? You know, what can I take from my previous experiences that build my confidence and that help me go in with good energy, good focus, and good presence? And how might my mindset around this get in the way?" Because it's almost that thing, you know, that, remember on that mindset slide, we're saying, "I'm awesome at this," where we almost kind of sit back and go, "Don't need to focus anymore."
Mm.
And then our level and our quality can come down without us even knowing it's happening. So yeah, great question.
The other thing I think around that is this self-validation and telling yourself that you are being brought into that environment because you are an expert and you know your field, and you're
Yeah,
there because you're the right person to be there, and it's reminding yourself of that as well, I think.
absolutely. And it's that thing about, you know, it's preparing, but not over preparing as well.
Mm.
And I always used to think, when I used to go into those scenarios, it would be, what do I do and what do I say if I don't know the answer to something? How do I make that okay?
Yeah.
You know, and then having a phrase that you're kind of comfortable to say, of, you know, that's a great question, let me go and research it and I'll bring you and I'll get back to you with the answer in half an hour or whatever it happens to be, you know.
Yeah.
So you've got something that doesn't throw you,
Mm.
because sometimes it might be what somebody says can really throw us, because we've tried to prepare for every eventuality, and we all know we can't do that. You just never know what someone, it's that circle of concern thing again, you know, you don't know what someone's going to say, got
Yeah.
no idea. So it's focus on the stuff you can do something about, and perhaps prepare yourself and think, what will I say if this happens? How do I make that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. There we are. Great. Steve, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, just follow on from that. I got a separate question, but I find it's just trying to be consistent, because you never always feel the same going into something, whether it's new or you know, or something that's you know, a replicated event and so forth. So I try and find a bit of consistency once I get to a decent enough level. What I want to ask you is basically, when you basically said that you relocated here, okay? So that's an interesting example for me. So when you were obviously going to a new area, you're meeting a lot of new people. So I want to give you find out a bit about your approach to this. So you would have probably gone into a lot of new sort of established, let's just say, networking groups, for example, where
Oh, yeah.
everyone knows each other, and you're obviously a person coming in, and they've already got their relationships already set out. They all know each other, and you're the new person in the room. So, which can be quite daunting. And it's I had a similar, slightly different situation, but I joined a sort of a gym class recently where it's a similar type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's quite daunting, to be honest with you. I actually understood as well, because it was predominantly a female environment and I was a male. I did feel a little. I now understood the other way around, how a woman feels going to a male dominated environment. Was very daunting, to be honest. Well, what I asked you was, what was your approach to that, as to going into that sort of situation, you know, and you know, how did you approach it? You know, obviously before going in, what was your mindset, and when you actually physically attended there, what were the first few things you did to try and build up those sort of relationships as a new person into that group?
Yeah, oh God, great question. It can be really daunting. It was for me. When I was in the Midlands, I'd never been to it. The only networking thing I ever went to was this horrible, huge Chamber of Commerce thing. And I joined for a year and thought, what have I done? And I would sit in the car park, really getting myself going, it's only going to be an hour. And in the end, I said to myself, what am I doing? I thought, you're going in, this is the last time you have to do this, because it wasn't the right place to be. And I think that was the thing originally, was finding the right places to go. So online was amazing for that, like looking at what people were doing and thinking, oh, how might this work for me, and what's the best environment to go into. I did a lot of stuff for myself around mindset. So knowing the stuff around the circles of concern, control, influence, I use a lot for myself. And I did quite a lot of work with myself around how might I feel going into this? I was daunted at the idea of walking in somewhere where everybody knows everyone, and they did. I mean, I was ever so lucky. They were incredibly welcoming. And after the first time I walked in, I just smiled. And I think the most important thing I wanted to do was to be me, to authentically be me and find my people. And so that's kind of the way that I tackled it, was going and thinking, I need to be me. I don't want to be anybody else. I'm a bit irreverent. I can be a bit silly. And I built that in a little bit to what I was going to say, because I thought I want to find people who enjoy that, who will respond to me. So I planned what I was going to say, assuming that I'd get an opportunity to introduce myself. At one of them I didn't, and I was like, oh, thank God, I'm going to do this. But at others, I did that, and I still do it now. So I regularly network. I found my 3 or 4 places that I'm really comfortable to go now, that I like going, and now I want to build relationships. Every time I go, I spend the journey there in the car talking out loud, because I'm a very extroverted person, but I talk out loud what I'm going to say. And I practice my first 2 sentences several times. So I know, because I get that kind of mind blank when I start, just before I think, oh, what am I going to say? And then I go, you know what you're going to say? You've practiced it. It starts like this. Off you go. Does that make sense? So that's an example, if you like, of the stimulus response. I know if I didn't do that, I'd sit there and my mind blank would come in and go, you don't know what you're going to say. Oh, God. Whereas as soon as that, because the voice still does a bit, it goes, you, and I'm like, no, I'm all right. I'm sorted. I've got my first 2 sentences, then I'm fine. Does that make sense? So I know for me, that's the thing that gets in the way.
And obviously your approach works just as effectively for people who are extroverts as well as obviously introverts. Obviously it can be a bit harder for introverts sometimes. And the other thing I was going to ask you as well, now you're established in the group and you've actually been in that situation, you one of the first people who goes to someone, if there was someone new coming to the group, are you one of the first people who sort of go in because you know how it feels, and you'll be the first one to go up to them and make them feel at ease? Is that something that you do now?
Big time. And I'm finding it's quite funny. It makes me laugh because I'm meeting people who haven't been to groups, and I'm saying, come with me, come along, I'll meet you outside and I'll go in. And I just think this is so funny. A year ago, I was the one that was standing in the car park going, oh shit, I don't want to go in here. And then people would, there was nearly always someone in the car park. I'd look around and just smile at everyone, and someone would smile back, and then I'd be like, okay. And they'd be like, I'm like, you're going in? And then you'd have someone to go in with. And I know what that feels like, to walk in on your own. So I tend to, whenever I go to one of these, Steve, I'll be in the car park looking around thinking, is anybody looking like they're a bit lost? Because I'll grab them and I'll take them in,
So my last point really is, naturally, and this is one thing I feel like this. I think most people are naturally drawn to people who are sort of open, positive, and communicative, and they have a sort of a bit of a lasting impression, obviously, on you. And I think if you can do that, be open, obviously communicative, positive, in your first interactions with people, it will go a long way. I've always found that. It does. So I think that's a good tip for people, because that's one of the things that I've found have been very helpful. So it can be a few months down the line, you see them again, they'll always remember you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is that, if people are more introverted, it's I used to work with someone who was hugely introverted as a trainer, and in our group there were, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us, quite a few were extroverted. Every time he opened his mouth, I shut up and I listened, because he didn't speak unless he had something really good to say. And I think that's what can happen with extroverts. I have to stop myself, my tongue running away with me. and waffling and talking far too much and saying something 3 times instead of once, you know. I have to watch that with myself. I listen to myself and try and make sure that the message stays succinct. Introverted people, often it's about making sure they're saying enough. But so everybody, I don't know, as I said right at the beginning of this, everyone I have ever met and ever coached and ever worked with has challenges around communication and putting themselves across. Even if they look like they don't, they do. They might have worked on it and they might be quite good at the bit you're seeing, but they're probably finding another part of it really quite challenging, because that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
but we tend to think, you know, we'll look at other people and we'll mind read and we'll go, oh, they're really good at this, they don't have any issues with this. Rubbish. You don't know what they're doing to get themselves in the room or what's happening for them, you know. And we can spend a lot of time focusing on that and not necessarily on ourselves, which is the most useful thing, because that's the thing we can influence.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that walking into the room and everyone's in groups of 3 or 4 already talking is terrifying, isn't it? We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Michael, I saw you started to type something in the chat. Do you have a question that you wanted to share with us, or? Michael's typing, and we've got Alina joined us since we started the session. So Alina, we just if you've got any questions or anything, we would either put them in the chat or there we are, or raise your hand now. What was I going to say? Yeah, the thing you mentioned at the very, very start around speaking too quickly, because I know that I'm guilty of that as well. That feeling of talking at the sort of the correct speed, if I can call it, it feels so slow, doesn't it? When you're trying to, it feels painfully slow.
Big time. You know, when I realised that I used to be called Tigger when I was a kid, you know, I'd bounce in a room and I'd be like, blah, 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 and off I'd go, and there'd be just energy, and I have to contain it. And therefore talking on something like this, I am so aware, I'm doing it right now, so aware of modulating it and calming it and slowing it. And the only way you can do it is by being aware of it. That's why I say self-awareness is the most important thing, because if you don't know you're doing something, you can't change it. So sometimes when I'm coaching people, they'll be like, oh God, I've realized this. And it's like, that's bloody brilliant. If you've realized it, you give yourself a choice and an opportunity to change it. Whereas if you don't know, you're blissfully ignorant, but it doesn't allow you to change anything or shift it. Does that make sense? So you know, being aware of something, I think is it's framing that into a place of, this is a really useful thing for me, because now I can do something. It doesn't make it easy, but I can do something. If not, I can't.
Yeah, it is that self-awareness, almost sort of listening to yourself, isn't it, as you're going along and just being aware of it. And the nervousness, of course, breeds that a lot, doesn't it? Is that when you're nervous, that you race along at 100 miles an hour. But then the downside of that is, of course, that the faster you go, the less impact that your words are having. And
Absolutely.
So, Alina, you got your hand up.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes. What I found awkward is when I attended networks events, and I found some time, you know, in competition with others who, you know, have the same interest with me, and I felt a bit awkward. I don't know how to overcome this. Because, you know, when there's a similarity of products, you know, you present the same thing, you know, we feel like we compete in each other here, you know, and actually instead of building up relationship, I feel like we are just, you know, not good friends. You know, I think this is what I'm struggling with sometimes when I'm in the midst of, you know, networking with others, and instead of me try and be free and create relationship, I feel like I would draw in myself from it. So I don't know whether you've got some tips, some advice onto this. Thank you.
Oh, Alina, I really feel for you. And I think this happens loads in networking. You know, very often when happens to me too, you know, when you're in a room with people, there'll often be people who do the same thing or something very similar to you. And I think it's all about this framing thing. It's about reframing and flipping it, you know, like we talked about on that stimulus response slide. I think you were on by then, weren't you? And thinking about, it's not about competition. What I've trained my head to do is there's plenty of work for everybody. It's really nice to collaborate and work with others. So actually, I've got quite a few people I meet up with who do really similar things to me, and we talk about how we do things, what our particular unique specialisms are within things, how we might support each other. And I think if it's shifting it in our heads to, isn't it fabulous that more people do what I do? Maybe we could pick each other's brains and support each other instead of holding it as competition, because if we hold it that way, it then makes us sit back and, like you say, you kind of retreat a little bit and feel a little uncomfortable or less likely to be open, which isn't going to help you or them or anybody really. So I think it's about framing it differently, if that makes sense, so that you can focus on the positives and the opportunities it can give you to be in a room with someone who does something similar to you, rather than seeing it as a negative thing. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I think sometimes, like you said, the mindset, isn't it, is so important, in this, and needs to work out on that. Thank you, Julia. Thanks.
No worries at all. I think it produces that inner dialogue, doesn't it, where you're going, oh God, there's someone here that does, that's a really bad thing, and then we spiral a little bit and get caught up in our own head, instead of like projecting outwards and going, this is fabulous, this is an opportunity, let's go and talk to that person and find out how they find it working in this area around here, any tips they've got for me, kind of thing. Yeah, great stuff.
Great, thank you.
Matt, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I nearly got to the end of the session without doing it, didn't I?
I was thinking we got to the end and no one's been muted. So.
There's always one, isn't there? And there's always. Anyway, what I was going to say is that we've run just past the hour, so unless there's any burning questions, we'll call time on it there. Thank you ever so much, Julie, for that. It was a really helpful insight, and I think for everyone, a bit of self-reflecting to do, just in terms of how we communicate going forward. And I'll certainly have some takeaways from that.
Great, thank you.
Just going forward then, keep an eye on our business e-newsletter, on our LinkedIn and our Facebook pages for Business Swansea. If you type in Business Swansea to either of those, you'll find our pages on there. We do have various events coming up, so keep an eye on those. And otherwise, we'll see you at the next one in the next few weeks or so. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.